Welcome to Creating the Future.
Creating the Future.
An Ohlmann Group presentation. We're spotlighting the visionaries who are driving progress and sparking positive change in Dayton and beyond. Today we're joined by Lisa Wagner, Executive Director of Levitt Pavilion Dayton. Through her direction, Lisa has built and led the nonprofit organization from day one with the mission of building community through the power of music, one free concert at a time. Levitt Pavilion Dayton is an anchor destination that breathes new energy into our downtown core, and Lisa's leadership is the heartbeat that sustains its vitality. We're creating the future.
Creating the Future.
With Lisa Wagner. And the future starts now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Creating the Future. I'm Evelyn Ritzy.
And I'm David Bowman.
And today we're joined by Lisa Wagner, the Executive Director of Levitt Pavilion Dayton. We're thrilled to have Lisa on the show today to talk about the power of live music, creative placemaking, and how she's using collaboration to connect people and create a lasting positive impact on our Dayton community. So let's get started. Lisa, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I know that I feel like I'm with friends anyway, so this is wonderful.
It's so fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's get started at the beginning. Can you tell us a bit about you, your background, what drew you to arts and culture?
So I had a career of 15 years at the Victoria Theater Association, now Dayton Live, and I was, at the end of my career, really over everything kind of audience-facing, the Vice President of Ticketing and Hospitality, and the ticketing piece is the piece that always used to tug at my soul because I saw as people were coming in for Lion King or Wicked, the big blockbusters, clearly I knew that this was it for them. They were not going to be coming to the Nutcracker or an opera. They were literally spending their stipend of entertainment dollars on that maybe one show for the family. And it really bothered me. So simultaneously, we were at a senior leadership meeting talking about this thing called Levitt. And to be frank, there were concerns in the room. Like people felt a little bit threatened about what is Levitt and how is it going to affect us. And I said, well, this is kind of ridiculous. They're having an information session at Amy Deal's studio. My husband and I will go. And I fell in love with the mission. I was also looking for my next role. I literally worked myself out of a role because I developed such a great team, a high-performing team at the Victoria that I was getting kind of bored. I didn't know what was next for me. So I started asking a lot of questions. And what I found out later was that was my job interview. They knew I was coming. And Sharon Yazowski, she's now, her title is the president and CEO for the Levitt Foundation, was in town for these fundraisers. That was all to raise the capital campaign to build the Levitt. They put her on me, like they literally, she became my handler for the evening. So I reached out to Jeff Ireland after that to see if I could find out more. And he was in the middle of like a huge litigation, so he didn't have time to meet one-on-one. But in January, he floated me the job description. So I went to April. April Mesher was in my leadership Dayton class, and she was helping with the capital campaign. And I said, "Are you interested in the executive director position for this organization?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't want to run it." She's like, and her eyes got real big and she's like, "Are you thinking about throwing your hat in the ring?" I said, "I am. I'd like to explore it a little bit." So the funny story is that I went through the interview process and I had coffee with April and I said, "I want you to be the first to know. I think I'm going to withdraw my hat." And she goes, "Wait, what?" And I said, "I mean, come on. I'm leaving a $16 million well-oiled machine to go to a startup." I said, "I don't know if I have the energy for this." And really, to be fair, I was scared.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she coached me a little bit through it and said, "You know what? For no other reason, just go through the process." And for the experience, like she was throwing that whole just interview, for the experience.
Can't hurt. Come on.
So I did, and I here I am today. It was probably one of the most terrifying things I've ever done. It was one of the hardest things. I mean, I thought opening the Schuster was hard. This was harder because there wasn't a computer, there wasn't a stapler, you didn't walk into an organization with an IT department.
Yeah.
Excuse me, it was all from scratch. And but it was a beautiful thing in that the team that I was hired I was hired in June of 2017, but they weren't done with the capital campaign. And so then when they did the shovel ceremony in August, obviously they knew who the executive director was, but they didn't want to do both at the same time. So I had to stay to the first Broadway show. So I stayed till October. But Ken Neufeld, my boss at the time, was very generous in saying, I know you need to hit the ground running, do what you need to do. I just want you here to make sure the team is solid. I know they're solid, but anyway. So I hired staff in May of 2018, and then we opened in August of 18. So between that time frame, I never said no to a coffee. I tried to get out and network as much as I possibly could. I would speak to anybody if it was a group of 5 people or a group of 100 people to try to get the word out about what we were trying to do. So for me, it was my passion project. There's a whole other side that I'd be happy to share with anybody over coffee, but all of my doubts, when I was having doubt and when I was going to pull my hat out of the ring, when I had doubts, the universe gave me signs, and they were dragonflies. And like I would be walking to the arts garage, and I would just be like, "This is ridiculous. What am I doing?" And all of a sudden, a dragonfly would like show itself to me. And so by the third time, in my backyard, I got the nudge. I was like, okay, I think this might be a calling in some way that I'm supposed to be doing this. And what I love most about it is that we got to design culture. As a leader of an organization, like it's really fun to be able to design that with the founding team.
Oh, yeah.
And as a female executive, I actually got to be my authentic self, which was leading with love. And everything that we really do at the Levitt and kind of around it is centered around love and creating that on the lawn. So, here we are. This is our 6th in-person season in 2024, and it's been a great ride. I feel like we're finally hitting some momentum. We were hitting a great momentum before the pandemic, but it's really coming back stronger than ever. I think people love being outdoors.
Oh, yeah.
And they're getting kind of what it is that we're trying to do.
Well, so you said here we are, which for those who don't know, the Levitt is part of the National Levitt Foundation, and it's a select network from across the country. So can you tell us a little bit about that network and then how Dayton was chosen to be part of that?
Yes, absolutely. So the Levitt Foundation is based upon the philanthropic focus of Mortimer Levitt, our founder. He was from an immigrant family living in New York City during the Depression, and his father had a cart outside of Coney Island, and he could hear the music from afar, but could never afford access. So he left school at a very young age, went into the garment industry, and ended up having what became the custom shop, which was giving men an affordable option to custom suits and shirts, and ended up franchising. He also was a very smart real estate investor. Anyway, his philanthropic focus in New York City, he and his wife Mimi gave access to children to arts experiences in New York. So now we move ahead, and they have a home in Westport, Connecticut, and Westport is going to take a landfill area and build this beautiful music amphitheater. And they asked, just like we asked Benjamin and Marion to help us with the Schuster Center, they asked me, Mimi and Mortimer, would you come on as a donor? And he said, sure. He said, but the stipulation is you can't charge for a ticket. It has to always be free. And that was in the mid-'70s. And I think over the next couple decades, what they saw unfold on the lawn about taking that barrier away, the ticket barrier, the community building started to flood his heart and see that this music was able to change the world. And his dream was that we would be in 30 cities. We are in 7 with permanent venues. The foundation has a secondary, actually there's 3 programs now. There's a program called Amp Your City, which is a matching grant for smaller rural areas like Berea, Kentucky, and Sheboygan, Sedona, Alaska. And they just unveiled at our convening in January Vibe, Levitt Vibe, which is Chicago, Indianapolis, and I don't know what the 3rd or 4th city is. So they're bigger cities who are culturally rich, but the south side of Chicago is not.
Right.
So that way it gives accessibility to the arts in areas that are like a desert, a cultural desert. So all of those combined create the network. The Levitt Foundation's commitment is different. Our agreement is a tri-party agreement. The City of Dayton, the Levitt Foundation, and then our nonprofit, we're our own 501c3 here locally, all have skin in the game. So technically, Levitt Dayton is on land that is owned by the City of Dayton, but because it's run by, us, and then it has a foundation name, it kind of holds a sacred space that it's not a First Amendment space, things like that. So so the cities are LA, Denver, Sioux Falls, Arlington, Dayton, Bethlehem, and Westport. Those are the 7. Houston, San Jose, and I believe there's a 3rd city are raising capital now. But they are going to cap it at 12. They announced 2-3 years ago that the Levitt Foundation is now a spend down. They're going to spend down all of the family assets. So they're looking to expand and make more of an impact with the assets that they have. So I think you'll see more AMP cities, more Vibe cities, because the investment on a permanent venue is so much greater. So right now, for instance, our $1 million budget, $200,000 comes in from the Levitt Foundation for operations. And then, there's a lot of great shared best practices between our permanent venues that really make it. It's nice to have a tribe. It's nice to have sister executive. We're all females, executive directors, to be able to lean on and say, "Hey, what do you? We've run into this. What do you do about that?" And Dayton became in contention in the true Dayton format of people sitting around a kitchen table, talking about they were grieving the loss of city folk and how much city folk provided in terms of cultural diversity of music and opportunity for artists from a regional and local level. And there just happened to be somebody sitting at the kitchen table that knew about the Levitt programs and said, "Have you guys heard of this?" And I mean, they at the kitchen table brought a computer, they were looking it up, and people started falling in love. And somebody raised their hand and said, "I know the mayor, I know this person, I know that person." And within 2 weeks, they went to, at that time, Memphis had a permanent stage. And they went down to Levitt, Memphis. And Rodney Veal, our current board trustee, one of the founders, and who was at the kitchen table, said that he tells a story of how after the concert was over, he went over and he was talking to people who clearly did not know each other outside of the Levitt. They were clearly from 2 different economic backgrounds. and said, why do you love the Levitt? How did you guys? And they said, well, we met here. We always sit in the same place. Like we meet each other here, and we've become such great friends that we do things outside of the Levitt together. And Ronnie said that was the defining moment that he felt like this is what Dayton, we need this. As still a highly segregated city, we would like that river to disappear and bring everybody together. So that was the impetus that set kind of things in motion. And of all the cities that I mentioned, Dayton raised the capital campaign of $5.1 million in 18 months. So we have a very generous and philanthropic community. And I think that the foundations said that we were on their radar because there isn't another, there isn't even an AMP in Ohio. There's 3 in Kentucky. I don't think, other than now this new Vibe one, I don't think anybody's in Indiana, but there are a couple in Illinois. So from our area of the country, I think Dayton was on the radar. But what solidified it for them was how rich our arts and cultural scene is and how philanthropic our community. Because while the foundation is there from the beginning, the terms of the agreement have an end date. And the hope is that the community falls in love and embraces it, and then they take over and they start supporting it and making it thrive. So, excuse me, even though they've truncated that time with the spend down of the foundation, we all knew that there was an expiration date on the Levitt Foundation being part of our tri-party agreement. So it was, how do you create this swelling of love and wanting it to continue on and keep getting better and better. So I think that's our challenge now. That's we have to. We do. We have an incredibly generous community, so we're very lucky.
And that idea of falling in love with love, that's how I feel about it. You really have to go to a concert to experience it, and it's almost magical. I know people call it Dayton's living room, and once you're on that lawn, it's just, there's so many people from so many different backgrounds, different zip codes even, different walks of life. Can we talk about how it's just more than music? It's more than going to see a show.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Avalon, because, whenever we were talking about like business development and resource development in terms of like fundraising, we always came down to, we have to get them on the lawn. It's very hard to explain it to somebody who's not experienced it, or I could say the why and give you stories ad nauseum that come off the lawn, but really to experience it is what I think touches your heart. When you see, people from our vulnerable population dancing with some of the, most well and resourced people of Dayton, and that none of that really matters. It really is kind of magical. I think that what gets some of our founding board members emotional is that it happened right out of the gate. You're out, it's like a field of dreams. Like you're out pitching what you think is going to happen. And this is a very unique public-private partnership in terms of creating a cultural asset. But it's, I think it's from the onset, it was really important for us to create a space where we wanted everyone to feel as though they were invited to the space, and that when they got there, that they were very welcomed and that it was theirs. This is theirs. We silly things like we marvel at the end of a concert that there's no trash on the lawn. Yeah. That's a simple little thing that shows that ownership of pride of place. And our homeless community put money in that bucket every night. And oftentimes I'm like, I just love that you're here. You don't have, and they're like, nope, this is my Levitt. Mm-hmm. This is my Levitt. And I want you to be here next week so it's those things that matter. I tell the story to every musician that comes through. When we just had Ruthie Foster here last week, and that was her 3rd time here, but her first time here, all we could afford was her and the guitar. And I was looking for her after the show to pay her. And she pulled me in her dressing room. And again, just having opened a venue, I'm thinking, oh, great, what happened? Like, did somebody, hurt her or whatever? And she goes, I want to talk to you. And I says, everything okay? And she's like, I play a lot of venues. She said, like I even play a lot of Levitt spaces. She's like, the venues that I play, white folks sit with white folk and black folks sit with black folk. Whatever you all are doing here in Dayton, Ohio, like this is what the world needs right now. More than ever. And she goes, I have to be a part of this. You have to bring me back with my full band next year. And I said, I forget because I came from the theater world and the lights blind you, but everything about our build, the height of the stage, the way that it's designed is about connection. It's all about connectivity. The fact that we have a dance floor, the way that everything's sloped. And I forget that you can see what's happening. And so her encore was Real Love, and everybody was dancing together. Everybody was standing up on the lawn, holding hands, swaying. And I got real emotional because where have you ever seen something like that before? And she said, no. I said, how do you tell a funder that there's love coming off the lawn? And she said, I don't know. She said, but it was so palpable as a musician that I didn't want to stop performing. So we ended up bringing them back, and she actually negotiated because she had 2 Grammy Award winning players to her to make a trio, and the price triples when you add, more players. And, she negotiated to fit our budget for 2019. And those 2 players were in the green room afterwards, and I went in to thank them, and they were stymied. They just said, what is this that you're doing here? This is like nothing I've ever experienced. So for me, that was the through line. It wasn't a one and done. It wasn't, it was something, we were really creating something special and something very real. And we just keep building on that. There's a young lady who was not a good player. She was living on our property prior to the pandemic. Through our resources and connections with the Dayton Police Department, she was able to find, the right path forward. And so now Karina is on our lawn at every sound check. And last season, she started crying at the end of the season. I think probably she has the mental ability of a young child. But she was crying, and I said, Karina, what's the matter? And she's like, I'm going to miss you so much. You're my family. You are my family. I'm going to miss you so much. And I hugged her and I said, it's okay. I said, I promise I'll write to you in the off season. Like I'll write you a letter. And I sent her a letter every month. And then as the season was coming and I had the schedule, I, mailed that to her, and sure enough, at the season reveal, there was Karina with, so it's just this beautiful space of where, I think a lot of people on the lawn feel that connection, and they grieve the end of the season because they miss each other. So that's really kind of special.
I think, and it's so needed,
yes,
today, right? Because we've gone from a front porch world to a back porch world, right?
Yes.
And we've gone from, they'll go out and do things to, I'll stay home and order it, and remote work and other things where people are just more and more isolated, and in their own tribes and in their own bubbles or in their backyard, right? As opposed to you come to the Levitt and it's, a lot of times you just go, right?
Right.
Sometimes you'll go to see a specific act, but sometimes you're just going to go.
Yes.
And you don't know who's going to be there or what's going to be on stage. You just know it's going to be a great experience. You're going to meet people and enjoy yourself, right? And it is what community is all about, right?
Yeah, thank you, David. That's true. I think a lot of people have shared with me that they've had really important and meaningful conversations with people that they would have never met had they not been sitting on the wall together. And somebody who has been my critic every season, as she approached me, she was like, I have something I want to tell you. And I'm like, okay, here we go. yes, like, what can I do for you? And she shared, she said, on Friday night, I was sitting next to a woman. We don't know each other. And she said, she changed my mind about a lot of things. And just because we had a shared conversation and we paused she was, and I think it was a two-way street. It wasn't just, me learning. I think we were both learning about each other. And she said, we paused and kind of gave reverence to the fact that this would have never happened had we not been here, and how special this space is. And she said, I just want you to know, like, thank you for creating such it's a safe place to have those conversations in a world where it's not safe to have any conversations. And I think that I've been using this data from the 2023 Surgeon General's warning on isolation and loneliness, that it being a crisis similar to the tobacco crisis. And the data is staggering. And the data in that warning is pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And to your point, like, I think the pandemic was an accelerator to those isolation feelings that people are doing, and remote work and things like that. So I'm scared. I'm hoping that more spaces like this become a place where people can come together. And I think community is at the top of everybody's mind right now. How do we create community? And what's fun about what we do is that's the checkpoint in everything that we do. We always make sure that we're not going into mission blur and things like that, because we do the camp in the summer. And a lot of people were like, why are you taking on a summer camp? And I said, you need to see what happens when the kids come on day one and they're super awkward and they're not looking at each other and they're like, kind of, and then by the end of that first day, they're exchanging phone numbers and they're hugging each other to the end of the week where they're crying because they have to say goodbye to each other because they come from all over the Miami Valley. That's tribe, that's community, so I mean, community looks different in some ways too. Even our musicians, right? Connecting them to new audiences, that's creating community. So it's really core and central to everything that we're doing, is that connectivity and community. So yeah.
Well, when you go to the Levitt, it all looks seamless and easy, etc. But I know that like there's a ton that goes on behind the scenes when it comes to like 50 free concerts a year.
Yeah.
And when we say a year, not a whole year, right? Like the summer. And what we love is how intentional you are in curating the artists and the bands who appear on the stage, and how that reflects the Dayton community. So can you tell us, like, what's that process like to select the genres and artists for each season, and then how do you use creativity in that role to make sure?
Yeah, thank you. So it was so the first year that I was doing it, if you had walked in my office, you would have seen Post-it notes of genres, and then as I was booking, I was making sure that one was not more full than the other. So it's pretty even keeled across. And that way I felt like I was, acknowledging some diversity in the programming. Without a doubt, I learned early on that blues, R&B, and funk are going to always be highly attended. But I can't just program that, right? I mean, so we do have those established genres that later became sponsorship opportunities. We try to figure out how to leverage that in terms of a series, like a rock and pop series, a blues series. We listen to people, like we listen to the audience. A lot of people give us suggestions of bands that we should keep an eye on. My inbox, I probably get 50 emails a day of people who think that they should be on the stage. And then we work with booking agents. And again, this is like a network resource that kind of taught me that there were a couple booking conferences that you can go to and you can see artists perform and see showcases. like, so Folk Alliance is, one of my favorites because it's really all showcases. It's richer in that than it is in content. And I got to see the War and Treaty in a ballroom. I got to see AJ Croce. I got to see John Hall. Or no, I'm sorry, Daryl Oates. No, wait, which one? No, John Hall.
Daryl Hall, John Oates.
Yeah,
one of them.
Whichever one, yeah. So, and like, it was like, who knew that he had such a blues, like a gravelly voice, right? So Daryl is the lead
singer or the bass player?
Yeah, so it's the bass player. So the bass player, like, who knew he had a voice?
Yeah.
I was in a hotel. They take these hotel rooms and they take out all of the furniture and they create these listening rooms. And so, I got to see a lot of really cool artists, but then I got to see a lot of up and comers that, I was lucky enough to be able to, fall in love with. And that's what a lot of people don't understand is we become fans of everybody before we book them because we're stuck with them for a year. Like, you have to listen to them. So we start that process in October. Like, the season ends in September. We do our little, wrap ups of thanking everybody for making it possible. And then we immediately start looking in October, November. As you guys know, from a marketing perspective, in order to get the print piece done, you have to back in. When you get it to the printers and cop and all that. So my goal is always to have the season booked by early March. And that sometimes happens. My director of marketing is very generous and kind to me because the reality is I think I have a contract that's signed and then somebody backs out.
Yeah,
like it's interesting how that works is that they can back out without any impact to us. But if I were to cancel on them, I'd have to pay them, so I'm not sure about how that's all fair, but we've had that happen quite a bit where we'll lose people at the last bit and it's at the printers and I'm hustling around trying to replace people. So, I think it's a little bit of everything. It's listening, trying to be a really good listener to the community and what they want, but also trying to balance the fact that, we want to be diverse in our programming. So even though, for instance, we launched, somebody asked me what does success look like? I think it was somebody on our production crew. And I said, well, I think that depends on who you are in the organization. If you're a board, a certain board, if you're a finance person on our board, they would say by our financials. Or somebody might say the number of people on the lawn. I'm starting to realize that there's a qualitative piece in like the magic of what happens on the lawn. And for instance, this past weekend, we celebrated the first ever World Indigenous Peoples Day at the Levitt. And we had a rock band, an opener and a rock band from our Native American community. And it was unreal. It was their message from stage was remarkable. They had everyone at the end of the concert holding hands. There weren't a lot of people on the lawn that night, but everyone came down onto the dance floor and they were all holding hands in a circle. And so then I thought, okay, that's success. That's like, that really gets you. I mean, it's a gut moment where you're, I mean, no offense, but they're not doing this at other rock concerts or, it's just really special. The year before we had Middle Eastern and we had, Indian music, and the same thing, the cultural exchange of having that music and then having people from all over the community joining people from that nationality or that race and doing their dance, their cultural dance, really becomes something beautiful and special, and I want more of that, those cultural bridges, because I think that also gives us a deeper understanding. I think it's interesting how close all the music sounds, because we'll have a West African rock group, like the tones. When I was listening to the Indian music sounds just like the Arabic music. And then it goes into the African music. Yeah. And then even the Native American music from this past weekend, there's those similar tonal things. And it's like, well, that's because we're all one people.
We're all connected.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the message. The message is we are all one family. We're all one. We just need to act more like this.
Well, music has the power to do that.
It does. You're right. That's right.
Levitt has become such an anchor in the downtown community too, and acknowledging that every concert is free, but there's also this economic impact that's happening with all the surrounding businesses. Can we talk a little bit about that economic impact?
So that was an intentional strategy as well, in that when we were talking about where to put the Levitt, the economic revitalization piece of creating the 9. The 9 is a 9-block radius around the Levitt. And so it was this a focus of, if we're bringing 90 to 100,000 people downtown every summer, that's going to feed the businesses and the foot traffic kind of in and around. Of course, there was a ton of momentum. Like Dayton is, I'm such a huge fan. The river is thriving, right? Same thing happened with Dragons baseball and everything that's happened around Water Street, and then the library. So we felt like this energy was coming south, and then the pandemic happened and everything's really halted. I think like the fire blocks were just coming online. But then what a lot of people don't realize is that what happened with Levitt leveraged the arcade to be able to go into Baltimore and say, hey, we have this, multi-million-dollar investment coming from outside the area that's going to do this. I think it helped the developers see the vision of the 9 and what was going to actually happen. And I think for the first time, we're starting to feel it as things are closing. The Center City building, their financing is going to come to fruition, I think, by the end of the year. So we're very excited to see all of that happening around us. We actually had the University of Dayton, the PA program, the Masters of PA, they did an economic impact study. And so that we could say with scientific evidence that 1/3 of our audience is spending a minimum of $60 in businesses around us, so that we can talk about that from, a real economic impact of millions of dollars that are actually being, infused into first floor businesses. I remember, I think it was Emily Mendenhall. She's like, oh, we know at Lily's. She's like, we know when it's 11 night. I mean, and they feel it, especially in the Oregon district. But I mean, the Century Bar was feeling it. And I think now with all these places that are going to open up around us, it'll be really exciting to see what happens. I do have, I think I got it from the Downtown Dayton Partnership. The vacancies, the number of vacancies pre-Levitt and post-Levitt, I do have it, but I don't have it memorized. But it is pretty amazing to be able to see that, aside from doing things that make your heart feel good, you're actually creating impact in the city, of which we're huge fans of. We just want to see it thrive.
Well, aside from the summer concert season, which is monumental in and of itself, Levitt, Dayton stays busy with pop-up concerts, educational opportunities, including a summer camp for teens, which you talked a little bit about. But tell us about each of the programs and then how they impact the Dayton community.
So coming out of the pandemic, we saw that the barrier was just not the ticket. There are other barriers. And so we peeled back. We're doing 45 concerts at the venue in the summer, and then we do 8 pop-ups in the community. So what and the way that we went about it was, again, trying to be authentic and intentional, is working with people who have trusted relationships. I mean, you have to build those relationships at the speed of trust. So sometimes if you are working with people who are already there, you can go into historically marginalized neighborhoods and they're loved and accepted and we're just there to help celebrate the work that they're doing. Examples of that would be like the Edgemont Community Solar Garden, Omega CDC. I mean, we've gone into Dayton Leadership Academies and done some pop-ups there.
Food bank.
The food bank, their mass distributions. That's a pretty emotional one when you see people hanging outside of their windows singing at the food bank at a time that's probably hard for their family, in terms of bringing a little bit of joy to a time that's really difficult. So, working with those types of partners, we saw, and then we were being asked a lot, can you do this for us? Can you do this? So we added the position. So we dug in our heels and laid a flag down and said, this is important, and did a community partnerships and relationship building position in the organization. And so the summer camp, educational outreach, and pop-ups all fall kind of underneath that. Our commitment to education, the summer camp also was a realization coming out of the racial uprisings after the George Floyd murder and the pandemic, that these kids, their voices are just locked up. And we really want them to be able to express their voices matter, and what they have to say matters, and then also inspiring creativity. So our partner, Sierra Leone, and her company, Urban Creative Arts and Signature Education Solutions, they came to us and said, we really feel a calling to our youth at this time. Who do we talk to? And to help partner with Levitt. And I said, you're talking to her. I mean, if we can make sure that this is music focused and that it's community building, I think it definitely feels great. So that was started in 2021. And then what we also, we've talked about the grieving that happens at the end of the season. We're trying to figure out, how do we keep everybody connected? And so there's that conversation happening, but then there's also this other conversation of, how do we add more earned revenue? We tried a ticketed concert at the venue in 2019. After doing 53 free concerts, we put a fence up around the Levitt, and it felt disgusting and gross. And everybody was like, this doesn't feel right. So, and we had people saying, wait, what? Like, I have to pay to get in now? And so we created a ticketed series in our off season this past year, 23 into 24. And that is to help fund and fuel the upcoming season. And it is a secret concert in a secret location with secret artists called Up Close. And it's been hugely widely accepted in that we sell out every month. Excuse me. And we've been in places like Black Palette, Boonshoft Planetarium, the Peace Museum. We were at Front Street. I'm looking at you because you've been to a lot of them with us. I'm trying to remember so really like kind of unique, fun spaces,
unexpected
venues that maybe people, a sound studio. We went to Dayton Sound, Dayton Sound Studios in Kettering, West Kettering, which people geeked out of, being around all this kind of equipment and stuff. So that was fun. And we meet with those groups ahead of, like, I'm doing that right now. I'm vetting all the venues, and we find out, like, what's the capacity and what are your rules? Can people bring their own beverages in? Or do they need to bring their own chairs like the Levitt? Or do you have fixed seating? Or do you have, chairs that we can set up? And then we put it on sale, and usually it sells out within like a day or two. And so it's been fun. And I think that people love, so it's 24 hours prior, they get the address, so they know where they're driving to or walking to. And then when they still don't know who's performing, and we try to do a local opener and then a regional and national artists. And what's nice is that there are artists that are coming through this way. We let them stop. They perform for 30, 40 minutes. We give them lodging. So they get to lay their head down on their way to the next gig. And it turns out that it ends up being a really lucrative, good for all of us. so that's been kind of fun. But it's not, it just adds this nonstop, because I'm going to do all of that and try to get it programmed, and I'll no sooner get done programming that, and it'll be time to reboot and put up the 25 season, which includes fundraising and programming.
So
and
you just never stop.
It never stops. Yeah, people think that there's like a quiet season at the Levitt, and there really isn't, because the tempos are different. The summer tempo is kind of physically demanding and a lot of work to just put on an event.
Yeah.
We do that, 45, 46 times at the venue. And then it's all the planning, it's no different than any other organization. You have to figure out what your budget is and where's that money going to come from, and, all of that. So, and then, contracts and production and things like that. There's a lot of moving parts, and we couldn't do it. We're a small but mighty team. There's 4 of us on staff. But we have an incredible board of trustees, and we have committees that help us, and they actually help shape some of the work that we do too, the committee work. So, yeah.
I love that too. I was going to shout out that you have a very small team.
Yeah.
It's remarkable what you accomplish, and I wanted to give a shout out to volunteers, because you're always looking for volunteers throughout the concert season. So if anyone's interested in getting involved, it's such a fun. I mean, what other volunteer experience? You just get to hang out and listen to music and meet people. It's so fun.
And our beverage crew has been known to break out and dance and behind there.
Coordinated dances.
Yeah, depending on who's back there. Winky, winky. Yeah, you can be a greeter. You can be at the information, selling merchandise, which could be band merchandise or ours. And then beverage, selling beverages. Then we have our bucket brigade, which is probably my favorite thing in the world, because you get to meet all the smiles.
It's amazing.
I mean, people are just so grateful, and they actually get mad if you don't get there fast. Like it's,
they do. People are waving their dollar bills.
Yeah, they're waving their dollar bills.
And they're not really just giving dollars. They're giving like 20.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole thing, and people recognize the importance of the Levitt, and they want to keep it around.
Keep supporting it. Yeah. I think that is finally resonating, is that, yes, it is free to attend, but like we say, it's not free to produce. And just like everybody else's expenses, what we used to say was like a $10,000 per concert. I mean, it's well over $15,000. I mean, artist fees are through the roof because everything's more expensive for them. Yeah. Production's more expensive. So everything's more expensive, unfortunately.
One last question that we ask all our guests, since our podcast name is Creating the Future. What's the future that you'd like to create in Dayton?
Well, I kind of where I started the conversation, in that this was a leap of faith for me. Gosh, I'm going to get emotional. This was a leap of faith for me professionally, and it has filled every imaginable thing in my world, in that if I could leave the world in Dayton, especially downtown, a little bit better and full of love, then that would be something pretty terrific. Sorry, I don't know. That's I saw the questions ahead of time. I didn't expect that. Sorry.
And that's exactly that's exactly what you're doing.
Thank you. You always worry as a leader, when is it time to step away? Mm-hmm. You don't want to overstay your. I still feel like I have more to do and more to give. But for me, it's if we could get everybody dancing. Yeah. Or whether they're at the Levitt or not, if they experience some type of joy and that trickles out into their life in some other way. I mean, I had a moment early on where, like, I will hug anybody that wants a hug. I'm like, and I don't really advertise that, but people just come up and they want to hug me. And one evening, my husband and I do this little debrief at the end of every Levitt concert where we just like sit and usually sip a bourbon and talk about the evening. And it hit me that I was hugging people that probably have never had a hug. And how much physical contact and being able to give that, it's so effortless.
Yeah.
Or it's just like giving someone a smile and saying hello and making eye contact and making them feel like they matter. And whether that's someone who's unhoused or somebody who's very sad in their life and dealing with a lot of stuff, I think that that's what I hope we can do. And sorry, I cried so much. I can't believe this.
It's so needed, and I always look forward to my Lisa hug when I go on the lawn.
Thank you. Yeah, I know not everybody's a hugger, so I always try to weigh that. But yeah, I think it's really important to share that with each other.
It could change the world.
I hope. That's my hope.
I think what I really love about that is that's a future that we all can create pretty easily.
Easily. It's not, there's no money involved.
Yeah.
Right? If we could just be kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a really emotional moment. Clearly, there's a lot of emotional moments that have happened over the past 7 years, really. And there was a woman who shared, I don't know what it was that precipitated this, but we were like dancing on the dance floor, and she came up and said, I need you to know how important this place what it means to me. And I said, oh, thank you. And she goes, no. She said, my son committed suicide in 2020. And I didn't want to leave the house. And I started crying immediately because I can't imagine losing a child. Right. And I said to her, I'm so sorry. And she said, this place is what pulled me out of my depression. She said, to be able to come here and dance. And she said, one of the artists that you had shared their story from the stage, and it was a similar story to her son. And she said it made me, I'm sorry, a volunteer. Somehow a volunteer, and they connected. And she said, I didn't feel alone. I haven't felt alone since. And so we hugged each other, and I bawled my eye. That was the night that I was on bucket, and I couldn't get my life together. I sobbed through the whole lawn, but I told her story all night long. I'm like, this is what we're doing. Yeah. It's a place for healing. It's a place for love. It's a place to feel seen and not be alone. So, yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you for being a part of it.
Oh,
yeah.
Both of you. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being a part of the podcast and sharing
for asking me.
Such a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Creating the Future.
Creating the future.
Thanks for listening. Creating the Future is a presentation of Ohlmann Group, a full-service advertising and marketing agency helping our clients create the future for over 75 years. Executive producers Evelyn Ritzy and David Bowman. Director and video editor Jason Carter. Audio editors Jim Hosfeld and John Brooks. Graphic and motion design Megan Murphy and Cody Rain. To hear and view other episodes and learn more about the Ohlmann Group, visit ohlmanngroup.com/podcast.